without further ado, we will get started here. Presenting Shifting FinOps Left in the development cycle, please give a warm round of applause for Usha Ganesh and Lucas Paratore.
Thank you. Thank you, I appreciate that. Good afternoon, everybody. Very, very happy to be here. This is my first FinOps X conference. I'm very excited. My name is Usha Ganesh. Thanks to Joe. You guys know that. I'm the director of the Cloud Business Office at Global Payments. Global Payments is a Fortune 500 fintech company, and basically the processor engine behind all the payments you see, merchant and issuer side. I am also a certified FinOps practitioner, and we operate in a multi-cloud environment, and any of the big clouds, you name it, we have it. So adds to my complexity and work too.
Yeah. Oh, good call. And I'm Lucas Paratore on the product management team at VMware, focused on our MSP and reseller business. I am also a FinOps certified practitioner and professional, which I like to maybe take a minute and give a shout out to that course and the value of joining it. So if anybody's kind of on the fence about joining it, one of the big advantages is you're getting access to a new community. It's not about the badge, which it's cool to brag about the badge, you get a pin on your lanyard, but it's really about getting access to this community of people that live and breathe FinOps. So shout out to that program. If you're on the edge, highly suggest making the jump. And then lastly, I'm on the Technical Advisory Council as well.
So let's get started. I'm an avid listener to the podcast, so I'll start out with this question. A raise of hands. Can you tell me who among here has had a FinOps moment, as Joe Daly puts it? Okay, quite a few. And I'm in good company because I'm pretty sure as FinOps practitioners, we all come across these FinOps moments. And if you haven't come across it yet, it's a matter of time, or hopefully never. And you learn from all of this here, right? So I just wanted to start off with a story about something that happened at Global Payments. And for purposes of anonymity, I'm not going to give you details, but you'll get what I'm trying to say. One of the project teams, one of the first project teams we had put up, came up to us and said, hey, we have a budget overspend happening. We want some help looking into what's going on. So the CBO, the Cloud Business Office, we started doing a root cause analysis. And what we found was kind of like the perfect storm of all things. First, the team that had put up the project was more used to an on-prem kind of project, so they had set up their environments, the lower environments, way ahead of time. And some of them never had gotten used, but they were getting spun up, and there was resources being consumed, right? And the tagging was either incorrect or incomplete, and that thereby led to wrong finance allocations. We also had high-level business cases with not enough granularity to call out what exactly those costs were. And we couldn't do an apples-to-apples comparison to say what we were trying to do. And finally, there was not much visibility into who were the owners, and thereby they didn't have the visibility into the reporting and the cost spend that was happening. And so that was pretty much what we came up with after that root cause analysis.
Yeah, these challenges sound familiar. Tagging, governance, cost visibility. Did you have a tool that you used for those?
Yeah, so while the CPO did put some governance in place and trying to get tagging compliance and everything, we do extensively use Cloud Health. We started, once this happened, for me, it was almost like, okay, I'm glad it happened because now people listen to me when I talk to them about it, right? And we talked to them and we got all of the reporting in place. We used the policies and alerts in the Cloud Health area to make sure the right owners get reports and alerts whenever they go over budget or whenever there's a cost spike and any anomalies detected, we are able to get on top of it and go from there. But coming back to this, right? So the story that I was talking about, all of this is a reactive approach to FinOps, something that is already in place, and then we come after everything is already put in place and try to fix it. We try to go back to the developers and the engineers and tell them, hey, this needs to be changed, which might involve a lot of coding, a lot more effort on their part. Businesses have to look at the CapEx and OpEx part of it and try to get more visibility into it. And then going back and fixing the tagging, which is something very simple and basic that you could just get right at the beginning, right? And so it got us thinking, and we started saying, okay, what about if we tried to go into preventive approach instead of reactive and go left in the development cycle, in the SDLC cycle, and fix it from there?
And so, why is this so important? And something that, for me as a PM, I really can connect with is, in the hardware industry, something that's accepted is that 70% of costs are determined at the design phase. it's not that they're incurred, but the decisions that you make at that time are going to drive 70% of cost. And this is something that we feel also applies in the cloud and software world. And not just us, but there's a working group, a quick shout out to it, the Architecting for Cost Efficiency. We just released our first white paper, and this was actually one of the things that was covered into it. And so for me as a PM, I feel like that puts a lot of responsibility on us to communicate these requirements for engineers to design things in the best possible way. So what are the usage patterns going to look like? What regions are people going to be accessing it from? When you roll this out for new customers, do you need to backfill? Is there any SLAs around this? So being able to communicate these requirements early and get these things into the hands of the engineers and the architects, they'll be able to make the right decisions and not have to think about re-architecting. And so Global Payments has something called the ARC process.
Yeah,
Can you
so
talk at all about that?
Yeah, it's the Architectural Review Committee, and we also call it the ARC process. And it's kind of like a central pipeline for all of the intakes, and definitely for all of the cloud intakes, right? It is comprised of traditionally the stakeholders you would see. So you would see privacy, security, compliance. You would see engineering architecture teams. You would see procurement and legal. And of course, engineering teams in there. And the CBO is trying to kind of work with these teams to make sure that we kind of pull cost efficiency as another factor while doing all of the design process. We are trying to work with them to build better templates and standards so that cost estimation is not complicated and you just build off of the standards and go get those done. And then once you have the clarity for estimation of costs, it is easier to look back against your business case budgets and compare, as well as to look forward and course correct if need be earlier on rather than wait till it's too late.
And historically in FinOps, it's very reactive. A lot of the things, you launch a resource, you look at the usage of it, and then you right-size it. You launch resources, and you purchase savings plans to cover those. And a lot of that is happening in the operation phase. And so if we're even just looking at this timeline, what we're really trying to do is shift that conversation and making it more proactive than reactive. And it starts with cultural changing, right? Changing.
Yeah.
Yep. All right, so maybe let's have a little fun with this, relating it to some sort of real-life example. So we're all in FinOps. We obviously save our companies so much money. We make so much money ourselves. So when we're thinking about our first house, it's probably going to be a palace. But you start to talk to realtors. You start to think about your requirements, talk to specialists. You might realize, you know what, I don't necessarily need a palace or the X2 112X instance. Maybe I can get away with a mansion. So you move into your mansion, life is good. But then when you're living in that mansion, you realize, I don't use that part of the house. I haven't gone into my third living room. I don't need 3 garages. And so now that you really understand your requirements, you're using it, you can then potentially right-size to an appropriate sized house. And now you're living, you only need 1-car garage, you only need 1 living room, who needs 3 of them? And so this whole process and this journey was wasted time, wasted money. And so the more we can shift that conversation, understanding those requirements, really asking those questions, and training engineers and architects to ask these questions, the more money and time you can save and maybe not deal with all of the moving costs. And then just one last thing to really talk about this too is that movement. You'll notice the driver to move from the mansion to the house wasn't about cost or wasn't about me not being able to afford it, because I could. But you know what? I wanted to allocate that money in a different way. So that's a big opportunity that you have with this as well, is you're going to spend your money on the right things to help bring the most amount of value. And so now, kind of taking this to the FinOps world, want to lead us off on Inform.
So we kind of, when we were putting together all of this, we kind of talked about how we want to approach it, right? And we wanted to kind of go over like a crawl, walk, run approach and how we kind of are working on it. I wouldn't claim to come here and say we are in the run and we have got it perfect. God knows we are not. We're learning as we go, and I'm just here to share some of what we're learning, right? So initially, we started off with high-level business cases, and these business cases had no cost granularity. It was not comparable to actuals. God knows we tried. And these were based on traditional on-prem business cases. So we initially said, OK, let's go see if we want to tweak it to make it more cloud-friendly. But what we found was the business case is an initial estimation. It is not based on an actual design. So then we have talked to the engineering architecture team and the ARC review committee and said, okay, now can we base it on an approved ARC design? And that is something that is going to be as close as possible to reality, right? Because it's an approved design. And so that's what we have in place right now is we have an approved design, and then the process is you use that approved design, go to any of the cost estimator tools, build out your cost, and get it back to us. Now you have a baseline. But it was still not enough to just say, hey, from a design perspective, you need storage. From a design perspective, you need this kind of instance, without giving details on what kind of storage they need, what kind of instances they need. So that's what we are working towards and trying to get more granular. The other thing we are also doing is working with our counterparts in each of the cloud service providers, with our TAMs, and pushing on not just functional design requirements, but pushing to make sure those design requirements are efficient and also take into consideration the cost for all of that, keeping in mind what we want to do in the future. And hopefully, we'll get to a stage where we can automate a lot of that, and we start with the base and only have to deal with the exceptions that come up.
Yeah, and maybe related, Cloud Health is a product, but we also practice FinOps at Cloud Health. So maybe talking through our unit economics journey, we see a lot of parallels to the steps that you've taken there. So for us, our unit we're really trying to tackle is around cost per customer. And that journey of starting at really generalized costs and being able to continue to move down and become more detailed, start to move into SaaS, start to maybe potentially bring in even some types of labor costs to really understand what that true unit is.
Yeah, and so like the next question was like, how do we want to work on these architect things, right? And one of the interesting conversations is, like right now, again, coming back to crawl, walk, run, is we generally look at what is already built, and then my team works on building recommendations around it using Cloud Health. And we say, oh, here's all of the unused instances that you can go delete, or here's what you can right size. These are the savings plans you can put in place. All of that, again, is reactive. So what we're trying to do is incorporating this question in the ARC process, right? So here we ask questions like, is your environment going to be in a non-premium region? And is it a lower environment? In which case, maybe you should be going only for a spot instance or spot rates, right? Asking questions like, you start off with no SSDs, and then you make a justification of why you need that, and then can be approved. Or you start off with saying, okay, you have small batch processing jobs, you have Kubernetes, you need to go for a spot instance. So kind of prescribing it that way, and then going from there. And then once we do that, work on automating all of those. We also have another process called the authority to operate, which I kind of alluded to earlier, which is kind of like the final stamp of approval. Again, traditionally, because we're a fintech company, we are heavily focused on security and compliance and risk and privacy. So it was very focused on that, but then our team is working with them to say, hey, not only do these teams need to make sure everything is compliant and secure and things like that, they also need to know what their costs are and where they're going to be spending it. And so we are working with them to make sure that there is an owner, there is a cost estimate, and there is also these owners for all of receiving these reports. And that is part of the compliance as well. And once that ATO validation is to be received, they need to make sure they're compliant with all of this.
And one of the things too, maybe kind of relating back to VMware and Cloud Health, like we're talking about architecting and dealing with cost projections of RIs and savings plans. Every company handles projections differently and handles their RIs differently. So for us at Cloud Health, when we're going through this architectural review process, our own review process, we are estimating costs based on RI discounts. So we're not looking at on-demand. Now we have VMware. They operate a little different. They have something called equitable chargeback. EA has something similar as well, where they have a centrally managed team that purchases RIs, and then they pass on some discount to their business units and engineers. So when they're putting their forecasting together, they're calculating their costs slightly differently. And then lastly?
Yeah, and then how can governance or this control be implemented and ensure the cost is considered a design, right? So right now, after that incident that I spoke about, we started pushing a lot more towards the policies. We started implementing policies across all our cloud providers to say, if there is a cost spike that is over a certain percentage and over a certain dollar value, you send an alert. Initially, the alerts would come to the cloud business office. We would hunt down who the owners were, and we would go tell them, hey, get this done. Once we put this in place to where we enabled the resource owners to get these alerts, provided them with how they can go resolve these alerts, it has been a far easier process. They also get budget to actual variance thresholds set. So, and it's customizable to their level, right? So they can go in and say, I want to know every time my budget is hitting 80%. Or they can be, yeah, I know I'm very close to hitting that 100% every month, so let me keep it close to 95. And we set it for them however they need it. That is centralized to the CBO. They don't have access to do that themselves. So they receive those alerts and they go in and at least there's awareness. And we want to be very aware of not setting the alerts to where it becomes noise, right? You don't want to be getting an alert every time there is like any change in your actual amounts compared to the budget, and then at that point it's lift the carpet, push it under, set a rule in my email inbox, and I don't have to see those again, and then you forget the real issues that occur. We've also started using the anomaly detection engine, so we haven't built a process around it completely yet. We're working towards it, but we are looking at the anomalies, and what that helps you do is step back and look at it to say, okay, over a 90-day period, how has the trend been? Is this something that happens on a monthly basis on the first of every month, say like some DR instance is being run? Or is this something truly different? And is there a slow trend towards increased cost, which does not show up in our policy alerts? And we are able to kind of go look at that, and we actually had a few key wins when we started looking at that and going, well, this didn't trigger an alert, but this is definitely an anomaly. And we were able to go shut down those things.
Yeah, I think that this is a really key step in maturity that we see with a lot of our customers, is that putting data in the path of the engineer. That at the crawl phase, you're creating alerts, you're pushing things to a distribution list, but there's going to be a time between when that was alert created and how long till the actual resource owner who understands and has the context to take action gets that alert. So that's an area that we see a lot of our customers really trying to tackle, is that time between alert and action. And some of the ways that we've also seen customers do that is through webhooks. So you can push these policy alerts to webhook endpoints. And what we'll typically see is some different tiering level of criticality. So they maybe create a ServiceNow ticket if it's $10,000 spike change or something. So pretty big, but not like the world is burning. But all of a sudden you see a $50,000 a month change with a 10% increase in whatever. Let's create a PagerDuty incident. Let's put this in a different pipeline, get this in the engineer's hands to be able to take action. And then taking that to the next level, potentially you have tags on those resources. So now you can build automation to pull tag values and then put that action and that alert in the path of that specific engineer.
Yeah, and we're also trying to build like KPIs and metrics around these anomalies and alerts. That way we can make sure, again, coming back to the noise, whether it is really valid, and also helps us account for when did these alerts get sent out, when did it get picked up. We're not looking at the time of alert resolution because every alert is different. Some might be quick fix wins and some of them might take a long more time, right? So as long as it's being addressed, that's kind of what we want to track, and that'll probably be feedback for us to come back and do a better job.
Yeah. And I think it's a key step too. You're talking about training the anomaly detection algorithm. So that's something that we have global payments. Our customers are able to train it for themselves, but also leverage our wide customer base. And we'll prioritize between those and really understand that, hey, we have a lot of customers helping train this, but global payments is unique. So really prioritizing their cyclical, their training, to give the best possible recommendations. Because I'm sure you know one of the reasons people don't act on anomalies is the noise. So much noise is created, so many alerts. How do you cut through the right ones? And so being able to train it based on your organization is a big step in being able to cut through that noise.
And yeah, and that kind of comes to the end of our...
Yeah, so love to open it up for some questions for folks. Anybody got anything, any challenges they're facing? Oh, and a clap, I'll take that as well. Thank you.
So this is not, my first question is not strictly FinOps. Has anybody pointed out that you look a lot like the lead singer of the band Switchfoot?
I have not. I don't know if that's a good or a bad thing.
No, it's a good thing.
Hopefully
Are
a
they
good
making
thing.
you
Do I
blush?
look cool? Is it 'cause I
You look cool. It's a good
I'll
thing.
take that. I'll
It's a
take
good
that.
thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
And your second question?
Did you plant that question?
Yeah, no. I'll slip you. What's your Venmo again? I forgot. I'll send you that.
So, okay, on a more serious note, we had happy user of Cloud Health, by the way.
Cool.
Luke is my technical guy, so I've been talking to him about the anomaly detection. But I kind of wanted to bring up we had a situation where in GCP, somebody set a big query job in place, and it was really expensive. I mean, we're talking more than our monthly spend for a project, a single project. And so this is a big deal, and we're getting calls for, we need, guardrails, like quotas and limits. And I've kind of wanted to stay away from that because in production, at least, those can bring things to a crashing halt. They can be complicated to administer and change. So would you agree that anomaly detection is the way to go if the notification is good enough?
I would say absolutely. I think it's going to be the best way for you to get the fastest possible alert. Obviously, we and all CMPs are at the will of cloud providers providing updated data. But for us, that's definitely strategically where we would want to push you guys.
Yeah. Now, the problem that we've had is that our database, our CMDB, that is supposed to have the project manager and budget owner in it, is kind of like in the early stages, it's the project manager, and then after a while, it becomes the budget owner, which doesn't really work for this kind of notification, right? Labeling is tricky for us because it's really kind of a cumbersome alphanumeric text string placement issue, right? So trying to update that manually with the right people, like say if you wanted to get the PM, the engineer, and the budget owner at a minimum, the trick here is, as you alluded to, get the notification going to the lower level operational people first, and then as it escalates, you move up the chain of people. And this is what we've had difficulty doing. So I know when I talked to Luke, one option was, using something in Slack. Any comments about, what customers have done to address this?
I can kind of answer to that. So what we have done is, like on the GCP side, we have landing zone owners, right? And technical owners and project managers and product owners. So we have distribution lists. So that way, even if there's retention, people moving here and there and stuff like that, the distribution list doesn't change. They just need to make sure that gets updated. It's not a label, it's in the notification, we just add that email distribution. So that email goes out to like a bunch of different people. And as long as the distribution is updated, you're still sending it to the right people.
And I would say the people that are most successful with implementing Cloud Health are integrating into a Slack, a ServiceNow, something like that. I mean, in FinOps, it's 3 to 5 average tools people have. And so if we can take Cloud Health and put that data into the tools that people are logging into every day, they're logging into Slack, they're getting notifications in their phone, that's really the way to kind of get change. So we oftentimes have that conversation with customers. What are the applications people are logging into every day? Sometimes you can't change that. So you got to just embrace it and put data in that path.
Right, and we'll give you all.
Teams through Webhook.
Yeah. I'll give you a moment to Google the lead singer of Switchfoot.
Hey, how you doing? I had a question about when teams are moving onto the cloud. We use AWS, and it's just, use the AWS pricing calculator to figure out what your cost is. And if you haven't used the cloud much before, it's hard to, how do you answer those questions? It can be wildly incorrect. So is there a way that you guys try to help that process?
We're still working on it. But I do know, I remember asking that question in the Slack channel, and there were a couple of options that came through, but suggestions for like a public open source solution where you can get all of the AWS pricing and you can plug that in. So that is something we're looking at. The other option is in our templates, in our design templates, we've been working with the EA teams to say, if you're suggesting storage, provide like a range, and then we can go to the upper part of that range. That way, it's as close as possible, and go with the understanding that it's just a baseline estimation, and then we do a true up, like say 60 days after it's been deployed. Because on the issuing side especially, we don't even know how many customers are going to get on some of those products and applications, and it's really hard to forecast that, and so we do have to go back and do a true up.
Thanks for the presentation. Just if I understand you rightly, so you have a pre-baked kind of architecture patterns, which is so-called FinOps and let's say security optimized, and you push it to the application team. have you seen any kind of a friction that, okay, you know what, I don't want to use, I'm just taking example, I don't want to use, let's say, Postgres SQL. I want to use Oracle or SQL with a license. So how you have managed that kind of a challenge?
So again, we are working towards it. I wouldn't say we're already there, but there are guidelines we're providing. So the EA team was talking about how there are resiliency-based designations for some of our applications. So if it is a gold or a platinum, they say go use Cloud Spanner. If it is something lesser than that, use Cloud SQL. So they provide that suggestion and then go from there. Yes, Aji?
Hold on, I'm coming at you.
Great presentation. So I have a question. So when you showed your architecture review process, it looks very much like a waterfall process. So how do you tailor that to an agile development approach?
It was not our architectural review process. It was just a basic process that we also kind of adhere to.
Yeah, well, I would say like it's presented this way, but I would think of it as a circle. Like it's just constantly reevaluate. And I think that that's probably something that is happening more because that's kind of reactive. And I think that already in FinOps in general, people are getting better about being reactive. But definitely we should be thinking about that. But kind of the goal is that we've asked, or that questions have been asked early on that you're not having to re-architect constantly. And it's more just about new features versus like changing.
It was a great presentation from both of you. Usha, you just mentioned you already involved FinOps team during the design phase of an application. I'm just curious to know how do you quantify the amount of savings that you have achieved when you involve FinOps during the application design phase?
No, we're getting to that phase, right? So to understand your question correctly, you're asking how do you quantify savings if you're already architecting for efficiency? Well, the least amount of opportunities for savings means the more efficient we are, right? That's what we are all aiming to get to, but we still have plenty of work left in looking at existing ones to go optimize those and kind of go from there. But yeah, KPIs, I think, are the best measures that we can try to work towards.
Have you ever faced the challenge of a false positive from CSP for optimization?
Yes, so obviously everything that is coming through as a recommendation is not something that we can take on, right? So we do provide it from a range and say, hey, this is a range of optimization that's possible. And then there's a feedback loop constantly going back with these teams to say, okay, this is what it shows, and this is what our tooling shows that you can achieve. Does it make sense for you? Some of the recent ones we've looked at is like we've looked at the storage and they're like, oh yeah, it does look like we're using a lot of the S3 storages and we can kind of move further down and get a lot of savings out of that. So those are kind of constant conversations we have. And even when we present to leadership, we call it out and we say, these are only potential savings. Please don't take that number to be actualized savings or completely possible savings. As long as you make it clear that yeah, there is a $10 million number on there, doesn't mean you're going to get to that $10 million.
Very good presentation. Question on when architects are doing their review and they're looking at different options in terms of cost, do you provide them with that cost visibility, like choosing a premium versus standard in, let's say, storage or different levels of PaaS services? Because what we find is that application owners really don't know their costs until everything's been built and after they receive their first monthly invoice. So trying to switch left is like, how do we get architects to really understand the cost of cloud?
Yeah, I mean, that's where we're trying to get to, right? And that's where we're trying to go towards. I wouldn't say we are there. But what has happened is while working with these teams, we are trying to get to the base level of what would be a good place to start off with. But what we are also doing is for large initiatives that we know are coming down the pipeline, that's where we reach out to like the SMEs and the AWS teams or the GCP teams or whoever it is we are working with, and we start stress testing the design requirements. And of course, we all have to be aware of the cost, speed, and quality triangle, right? So there are many instances where we're like, yeah, we have to get out of these data centers, and we have to get on there by September of whatever timeline. And so at that point, there's not much leeway, so we still have to look at that to say, is cost the most important thing we are looking at right now, or is speed the most higher priority right now, and then go from there. But ultimately, where we want to get to is plug in the cost, maybe through an API or webhook or whatever, but plug in the cost to our templates and provide that range. Thereby, when they go start clicking it, they'll be able to see the cost immediately.
All right, we are just about out of time. Do you want to go to the last slide there? Here you can connect with Lucas and Usha, and you can network with them on the Aircraft Carrier FinOps Award and celebration this evening. Definitely take advantage of that. Let's give a giant warm round of applause and cheering for Usha and Lucas.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks for watching that session. I'm sitting here in San Diego right after FinOps X. We hope you join us next year here live 2024. In the meantime, please subscribe to the channel and join the community. Get involved, join the summits, get in a working group, and don't forget to get FinOps certified. Because next year here in San Diego for FinOps X, it's going to be twice as big. Come join the party. Come meet your people. Welcome home.